So this is the lesson for 7-2 day 2. What we're looking at again, just like from Tuesday, is complementary, supplementary, and vertical angles. Except today you're going to have algebra in with it. All right. So you're going to have to set up an equation, solve for x, and then sub it back in to find the missing angles. So just as a quick reminder, complementary angles form this picture. They take a right angle and divide it into two pieces. So for example, you could have 40 degrees here and 50 degrees here. Remember, they have to add up to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles take a straight angle and divide it into two pieces, or sometimes they even divide it into three pieces as well. Either way, the two or three angles have to add up to 180 degrees. So for example, this one could be 60 and this one could be 120. Vertical angles form an X. The top and bottom of the X are the same. So maybe this angle is 40. That would make this bottom angle also 40. So the top and bottom of the X are the same. And then the left side and the right side of the X are also the same. So maybe this angle is 140 and this angle is 140. So the top and bottom of the X are the same. The left and the right of the X are the same. So moving on to keeping those things in mind, moving on to today's lesson, what you're going to have to do in every single problem is you're going to have to set up an equation, either set it equal to 90, set it equal to 180, or set it equal to each other. And then you're going to solve for x. So you're going to get an answer like x equals 20. That's not what the angles are, because then you need to sub that x back in to your picture and find the missing angles. So let's take a look at this first one. In this first one, we have this picture. All right, so we have complementary angles. Complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. So we could put an equals 90 at the end of our equation right away. Now, what you're going to have to do is add together your x's and your x's, add together your plane numbers and your plane numbers. Remember, I like to call those Madonnas. So make sure that you're looking at the signs that are in front. All right, like this plus 5 is really a positive 5. If we had a minus 5, when we go to add together those plane numbers, those would be adding together negatives. All right, so be very careful there. So we have 2x and 3x. 2x plus 3x is 5x. Always add together your letters first. Then adding together our plane numbers. Now, there's nothing right there. This one doesn't have a plus or minus anything after the 2x. So we don't have to add anything together, but we do have to bring down our plus 5 because we're doing a positive 5 and nothing, which is positive 5. So that was step number 1. We set up our equation. Again, we set it equal to 90 because we have complementary angles. You see that right angle there? So right angles equal 90 degrees. Now it's just a two-step equation. So we're going to solve this two-step equation by doing minus 5 and minus 5, trying to get the 5x all by itself. 90 minus 5 is 85. Divide by 5, divide by 5. This is just a one-step equation here. 85 divided by 5 is 17. Now, on your homework, you will have to write down that x equals 17. But we're not done, all right? So we solve for x. That was step number 2. The third step says sub back in to find the angles. You need to take this x equals 17, sub it into there for x, and sub it into there for x to find the two missing numbers in the angle. So down here we have 2 times x. Well, instead of 2 times x, we would have 2 times 17. 2 times 17 is 34. So this is a 34-degree angle here. Here you would have, instead of 3 times x, you have 3 times 17 plus 5. 3 times 17 is 51. 51 plus 5 gives you 56. So our two angles are 56 and 34. You have to find all three, all right? You have to find the x equals number, and then you have to take that and sub it back in to find the two missing angles. Now, it's always a good practice to check to make sure that your answer makes sense. Take your two angles and add them together. 56 plus 34 gives you 90. And that's what we wanted because this is complementary angles. It's the right angle. So always make sure your answer makes sense just by adding together your 2 or 3 answers and see if it equals your 90 or 180 that you were looking for. So taking a look at the next one. In this next one, we have x and we have 4x. So that picture is supplementary angles. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So we want to add together our x's with our x's. Now, remember, when there's a letter that's all by itself, there's really a 1 in front of that x. 1x plus 4x gives you 5x. Now, this particular problem doesn't have any plus or minuses after it. So there's nothing to add together. We don't need to do that part, all right? Because there's no plus or minuses. 5x equals 180. That's the equation that we need to solve. This is just a one-step equation, so divide by 5, divide by 5. 180 divided by 5 gives you 36 for x. You now need to take that 36 for x and sub it back in and sub it back in. 1 times x, 1 times 36 is 36. 4 times x, so 4 times 36. 4 times 36 is 144. Always stop and make sure that your answer makes sense. 36 plus 144 does give you 180, which is what we wanted for supplementary angles. So that was supplementary angles divided into 2 pieces. This one has supplementary angles divided into 3 pieces. So again, we're going to set it equal to 180 because supplementary angles add up to 180. I always like sticking a 1 if I have a letter all by itself because there's really a 1 in front of that x. So adding together your x's, we're adding together a 1x, a 2x, and a 2x. 1 plus 2 plus 2 is 5x. Now we're adding together our plain numbers or our Madonnas. Now be careful, this acts like a negative 10 because of the minus sign. So we have negative 10, positive 10, and negative 20. Well, if you type that into the calculator, negative 10 plus negative 20, because we're adding together all 3, this positive 10 and this negative 10 just cancel each other out. So we're just left with negative 20. Since we have negative 20, we're going to write minus 20. So now we have our equation. All right, now we have our equation. It's just a 2-step equation. We want to try and get that 5x all by itself. So we want to do plus 20 and plus 20. So 5x equals 200. Divide by 5, divide by 5. X equals 40. Again, 40 is not our angle measurement. 40 is just what x is. We now need to take that 40 and sub it in for x, sub it in for x, and sub it in for x. So we're subbing it in 3 times because we have 3 different angles here. So we have 1 times 40. 1 times 40 is 40. Minus 10 is 30 for this angle. We have, instead of 2 times x, we have 2 times 40. 2 times 40 is 80. Plus 10 is 90. So this upper middle angle is 90. And then we have 2 times 40. 2 times 40 is 80. Minus 20 is 60. So our 3 answers are 30, 90, and 60. Always make sure that your answer makes sense. 30 plus 60 is 90. 90 plus 90 gives you 180, which is what we wanted because we had supplementary angles. Next one are vertical angles. Now, vertical angles form an X. The top and bottom of the X are the same. The left and the right of the X are the same. So what I think is personally very, very helpful for this is whenever you have vertical angles, and I talked about this the other day, put an equal sign right in the middle like that. Why should you do that? Why am I suggesting that you do that? Well, I'm suggesting that you do that because vertical angles are equal to each other. If you put an equal sign right in the middle of your vertical angles, what I have here in the blue box is the exact equation that you need to solve. You're not setting it equal to 90. You're not setting it equal to 180 because those are complementary and supplementary angles. These are vertical angles. Vertical angles are equal to each other. So if you just put an equal sign right in the middle, that is the exact equation that you need to solve. So now we have letters on both sides of the equal sign. I have a 2x on one side. I have a 3x on the other. I personally like working with the smaller of the two letters first. So I need to get all my letters on the one side. So I did minus 2x and minus 2x. Bring down your 10, bring down your equal sign. 3x minus 2x is 1x. Bring down your minus 40. Now we just have a two-step equation. So plus 40 plus 40. So we have 50 equals 1x. Divide by 1, and you get x equals 50. Now remember, 50 is not your final answer. We need to take that 50 and sub it in for x. Take that 50 and sub it in for x. So we have 2 times 50, which is 100, plus 10 is 110 for this angle. Over here we have 3 times 50. 3 times 50 is 150. 150 minus 40 is 110. Now, does our answer make sense? Yes, it does. We have 110 on one side, 110 on the other side. Those two angles, because vertical angles are equal to each other, and those two angles are equal to each other. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. We have 3x minus 10 and x minus 10. I'm going to give you about 1 minute to set up the equation, solve it, and sub it back in. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. So in this one, you have picture of supplementary angles. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So we want to add together our x's and our x's. Remember, I would put a 1 in front of that x because anytime you have an x all by itself, there's really a 1 in front of it. So add together your x's and your x's. 3x plus 1x gives you 4x. Add together your plain numbers or your Madonnas. Negative 10 and negative 10 make negative 20 when you add them together, but we're going to write minus 20 in our equation. Solve that equation. So plus 20 plus 20. 4x equals 200. Divide by 4, and you get x equals 50. Now that 50, you need to take that 50 and sub it back in for x. Take that 50 and sub it back in for x. 3 times 50 is 150. 150 minus 10 gives you 140 for this angle. 1 times x, so 1 times 50 is 50. 50 minus 10 is 40. So our two answers are 140 and 40. Again, always make sure that your answer makes sense. 140 plus 40 does give you 180, which is what we wanted. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. Set up your equation, solve for x, sub it back in to find the missing angles. So these are complementary angles. Complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. You see that picture of the right angle right here. So that's 90 degrees. There's really a 1 in front of this x. There's really a 1 in front of this x. So add together your x's and your x's. 1x plus 1x is 2x. Add together your Madonnas or plain numbers. 13, positive 13, and a negative 1 make a positive 12. So we're going to write plus 12. So there's our equation. Minus 12 minus 12. So we have 2x equals 78. Divide by 2, divide by 2. X equals 39. Take that 39 and sub it back in for x. Sub it back in for x. 1 times 39 is 39. 39 plus 13 gives you 52. 1 times 39 is 39. 39 minus 1 is 38. So your two angles that you should have gotten are 52 and 38. Always make sure that your answer makes sense. 52 plus 38 does give you 90, which is what we should have gotten because we have the right angle with complementary angles. One last question. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. Set up an equation, solve for x, sub it back in to find the missing angles. So these form vertical angles because vertical angles form an X. In your vertical angles that form an X, the top and bottom of the X are the same. The left and the right of the X are the same. Remember my little hint to you. My little hint to you was put an equal sign right in the middle of that because this sets up your exact equation that we want to solve. So when you do that, you have 5x equals 2x plus 30. You want to get all your letters onto one side. I like working with the smaller of the two letters first. So I'm going to do minus 2x and minus 2x. So we have 3x equals 30. Divide by 3, divide by 3. You get that x equals 10. Take that 10, sub it back in for x, and sub it back in for x. 5 times 10 instead of 5 times x. 5 times 10 is 50. 2 times 10 is 20. 20 plus 30 is 50. So I got 50 and 50. Always check to make sure that your answer makes sense. It does because you have 50 and 50. So make sure that you are setting up the equation, solving for x, subbing it back in to find the two missing angles. Complementary angles add up to 90, supplementary angles add up to 180, and complementary angles are equal to each other. Be very careful with the minus signs and the plus signs. Treat minus signs like negative signs and plus signs like positive signs.